So as we're kicking off the Munich Security Conference, I guess the thing I want to start with, of course, is everyone is so incredibly distracted with the potential of direct confrontation with Russia over Ukraine. To what extent, if at all, is that a distraction in the meetings that you're having with heads of state, with principals, and trying to get climate moving? Is it mattering?
Well, obviously, look, it goes without saying that critical principles and values are at risk and at stake in this. It's not a small confrontation in that regard. So obviously, I wouldn't call it distracting. Will it consume a certain amount of focus? Of course it will, should. But the key is to remember here that Ukraine, one way or the other, we're going to resolve it ultimately over X number of years. But climate crisis remains existential, just as it was before the Ukraine crisis came up. So if, in fact, President Putin decides to go into Ukraine, it's going to have monumental impact on the ability and willingness of people to do what's necessary, because prices are going to go up on fuel. The immediate response to economic stress is going to be trying to find the easiest way forward, and that's going to, unfortunately, inevitably result in more fossil fuel consumption. So it could be very tough for the climate agenda. There's no question about it. And of course, there's going to be pressure to fill the gap. And that means that some of the choices we had available to us to try to follow through on Glasgow are going to be pinched. No question about it. But I think if leaders around the world stay focused, including, frankly, China and Russia, Russia has a profound climate problem. 66% of Russian territory sits on top of what used to be frozen land. And the permafrost is now thawing. Their infrastructure in cities built up there is in trouble, and their extractive infrastructure, the infrastructure with which they extract their gas, is also in trouble in places. So, President Putin really has a much bigger challenge facing him with regard to his own economy and his own long-term economic future for Russia, which frankly dwarfs, in my judgment, Ukraine, where he ought to be putting focus.
Over the course of the past month, your relationship, your engagement, and your teams with the Russian climate envoy and them changed at all, or still kind of business as usual?
No, we've been able to stay on a pretty clear track. The only problem is Russia is not among the nations that has taken on ambition sufficient to the task. And Russia is one of the top emitters in the world, together with China, India, Indonesia, Mexico, some others. We have a big job to do to bring them on board. And obviously, many of us would far rather that that was the battle in front of everybody here in Munich and elsewhere, rather than a rather retro kind of diversion that he has confronted the world with.
Oh, sure. I mean,
and that's very sad.
There's nothing more 20th century than potentially putting tanks into Ukraine.
It's just so behind, in a sense, the times and the capacity we have to resolve these kinds of issues. I believe President Biden and Secretary Blinken have put very sound and strong proposals to Russia that if you really want to find a solution, you can. And the issue is whether or not President Putin can see the wisdom of moving in a better and different direction.